Je parle français, mais seulement un petit peu. Je n'ai pas de practice. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I won't be continuing the rest of this. When I was growing up in Calcutta, you learned to speak in French if you wanted to know the best girls. So I learned when I was very young. I want to spend the next 15 minutes explaining what happened with the social enterprise, where that's going. It's going to be a very fast tour. My name is JP. My email address is jp@salesforce.com. That's the easiest way to get hold of me if you have any questions. Okay, let's start. We have to remember how we have got to the position we've got today. All we used to analyze business from in the past was transactions. In fact, IT used to be called transaction processing, mainly because that's all we did. We only knew something had happened after it happened. And there was a reason for it. The reason it happened that way was that the cost of acquiring the information of what a customer was doing was very high. So all that we would do was to put equipment that collected what a customer did at the point the customer had done it. So you had cash registers, you had point-of-sale systems, you had ATMs, you had the infrastructure and backbone for inbound calling. But all of these fundamentally collected data about what a customer did only after the customer did it. And then, as you would expect, the transactions we collected were in the past. They took place mainly in the back office systems. Only back office people could see them. When they saw them, what we could do with them was analyze a past predicts the future world. This was the world that we have lived in for most of our adult working lives. That history was reflected through a past predicts the future analysis of what was going on because the cost of doing anything else was high. That was in the past, and for a long time, that's the way we lived. Why are things different now? For one thing, what has changed dramatically is that the cost of acquiring that information has changed with the cost of the infrastructure. The previous gentleman spoke about the implications of Moore's Law and how that has shifted prices. The fact that we now have ubiquitous computing power in all of our hands means that a customer now has the opportunity to express what he is currently doing or what she plans to do in a way that is easy to collect. That has never been the case before. And not just to collect it, but to persist it, to be able to analyze it, to be able to search it. The customer has changed tense in speaking to us from the past tense through the present to the future. The customer of today is born cloud. What does that mean? The customer has already shifted time. Some of you may remember this. When I was growing up, that was my first actual voicemail system. It was an answering machine that was like a tape recorder stuck to the side of my phone. And the only way I could access that was if I was next to that machine. After a while, I could access it by ringing my own phone remotely. Now I don't need those machines at all. The transference of that allowed me to start shifting time because I didn't have to be synchronous in receiving a message. Most people use something that is similar to some way of receiving push mail. And the ability to shift place has again been with us now for quite a while. And we've shifted time and place in many, many ways. It is not just in terms of messaging, it's in terms of how we consume entertainment, how we consume music, how we deal with the asynchronous way people work. Because work is essentially, for a knowledge worker, lumpy, bursty. It does not come at a steady state. It comes much more in a sine curve. And then we have to learn how to be able to cope with that. But we have tools today that allow us to shift both time and place, that effectively take things that used to be synchronous and allow it to be treated asynchronous. These sort of shifts that allow us effectively to say that we can operate in systems that are adaptive, that are responsive to change, that allow us to scale up or down almost on demand, is fundamentally what forms cloud. People are born cloud today. It's not just that they are born cloud. They have been raised mobile. My favorite definition of a teenager, and I have 3 children who have been teenagers, 2 of them are still teenagers, but I know that I'm standing in an elevator, and I can hear a little noise, but I do not know which one of them is sending the message while their hand is still in their pocket. Okay? They are a different generation. They act differently. And they are actually raised mobile in everything they do. We've already seen the data points. This is not just about emotion. Right? Smartphone sales have passed PC sales quite a while ago. They passed feature phones quite a while ago. We've already reached a point where most of you, if you haven't seen it, please go to YouTube and just scan this single phrase. A magazine is an iPad that does not work. And fundamentally, you see a 1-year-old child discard a magazine because it won't respond to her pincher, zoom, and she checks her finger to see if it works. No good. Throws the magazine away. Okay? We are living in a generation where you had to be maybe 13, 14 before you understood QWERTY. You have to be 6 months to 1 year before you can understand an iPad. The age of adoption of technology is changing very fast. So if my children are brought up mobile, I don't want to know what my grandchildren will be brought up, but they are learning very fast. They're growing up social. Social network messages have already passed email sometime in September 2009, the volume of traffic. While email started in 1971 and was 40 years old last year, we've already reached a point where the volume of traffic in social networks exceeds that of email. Facebook is now already the size of the web in 2004. As a result of that, if you think that Facebook is irrelevant, that means you thought the web was irrelevant in 2004. Decide that for yourself. I cannot. We're reaching a point where the way our customers are behaving, they've already gone somewhere else. They have shifted time, they have shifted place. They're always connected, ubiquitous, with the power to act in their hands. They are in control and they have power. So what does this mean to most businesses? Okay, is that the end of the world as we know it? What does it mean when the customer has that much power and that much capacity to express? Well, I'm putting it to you, actually, that we can view this whole thing completely differently. Instead, we can say, we used to live in a world where we did surveys, where we did focus groups, where we had to take limited understanding of what a customer wants. We saw a reflection of a moon in the water and we claimed it was the sun. That was the way we did our analysis, because the cost of acquiring information about activity and intention used to be very high. And the only information we had was past predicts the future. And as a result of those things, we used to have to guess a lot and get a lot of things wrong. Nowadays, we can know the answer. But in order to know the answer, we have to understand something. The advertising age, the McLuhan age, gave us a time where all the activity was to say, please, you come to me. The customer was invited to come into the parlor of the company. Now, we need, as companies, to have permission to go into the parlor of the customer because the customer has shifted. That parlor is the social network. That's where their activities are. That's where they spend their time. That's where your brand is. That's where your references to products are, your feedback loops. Everything is in the social networks. And if you don't understand that, that's probably why you can't see your customer. Because you have a choice whether you go there or not. The customer has made his mind up. But these customers are a completely different beast from any previous generation. They tell you where you are. Okay? Our devices are all GPS. They tell you what they're doing. Activity streams are themselves about 10 years old. When we speak of Twitter and its equivalents, that's a decade old. We have already evolved from the activity stream to the intention signal. People are now sharing what they plan to do. If you don't fix this, I'm going to change company. I want to go on holiday this time. I'm thinking of buying a car. These are intention signals that are being voluntarily given. We have a choice whether we want to use it or not. We can still go back to our focus groups. We can still look at a reflection of moon in the water and decide it's the sun. Or maybe, as a miracle, we can listen to our customers. They tell you who they're with. This is extremely valuable, because the amount of data that is coming through is going to need filtering, and I will come to that. They tell you what they like, and they don't just tell you what they like at present, but in terms of voting or plus ones or like buttons. They even tell you what they would like, because again, the intention is being signaled. This is extremely powerful because we would pay through our noses, our arms, our legs, whatever, for this kind of information in the past. Now, we get it pretty much for free because the customer would like to have a better service. Recommendations, you could say that at the time of the mid-1980s, Walmart understood something about networks and said, if we could connect our warehouses and our distribution, then we can reduce the scale at which we can enter a town, and 100,000 no longer was the limit of entry. They realized that distribution was a network. Amazon came along 10 years later and said, why is the distribution hub the edge of the network? Why can't we send one item to one home? And they transformed retailing by changing the edge of the network to the home. Facebook came and transformed that yet again, because they said the home is not the edge of the network, the home is the center of the network, because recommendations radiate across the friend graph of that individual. Now, many companies are considering 20% of their advertising budget should actually be placed into the social networks because the recommendation engines are that much more powerful when you have the friend graphs. But friends are more important for other reasons. When you have the kind of data levels that come from live streaming, which is the collection of past, present, and future signals that are coming through, you have very large quantities of data, and you must have ways of filtering. The best filters of data are actually your social networks themselves, because it is the network that tells you what's important, how to retweet it, how to raise the importance of something or the priority, how to make sure you personally see it. And that is as true for a company as it is true for an individual. The intention signals are there at levels that we've never believed before. They act around social objects because people share. People share things about pictures, about films, about products, about services. They embed comments, they embed feedback loops around an object across which the conversation takes place. These feedback loops are critical because that's what allows you to be able to go quickly into a market, understand how your product is doing, and change that product as needed, because the space of change is as important as anything else. We have built a history of managing unit costs. Now we have to focus on managing the cost of change, because that is going to be the variable that makes success possible. The semantic web has now just begun to take effect at a time when the kind of data that is underlying all this is machine translatable into real actionable information in ways we've never had to before, provided we understand that that information is there. We've therefore come to a point where that data is going to allow us to make better decisions than we've ever done before. What does this all mean for companies? What does this change really represent? Customers have shifted tense from the past to the present to the future. This should be good news for us. Everything that happens is now date-stamped, time-stamped, location-stamped. The metadata that is available through actions is richer than has ever been before. These large quantities of data are filtered by social networks so that we don't have to deal with the overload. There is no such thing as information overload, as Clay Shirky said. There is only filter failure. We need three things to be able to solve this. First and foremost, we have to understand, like 20 years ago, customers did not come with an email address. 50 years ago, customers did not come with a telephone number. Today, customers must come with their social network and their profile understanding, because otherwise you're discarding an integral part of their life and not including it in your analysis. Employees have to be in networks to connect to the customer. Customers have to be in networks. The worst thing you can do to a customer is expect that customer to connect with your employee and find that that employee knows nothing about the customer, nothing about the customer's wants or needs, and has no power to be able to do what the customer wants. You might as well not have started. If you want to engage in this market, you need to have all three steps in place. The profile that makes sure that your company understands what your customer is, wants, needs, plans. The ability to respond by empowering your employee to act upon that. See, I noticed something very strange. I was chief scientist at BT before I joined Salesforce. And when we implemented a Twitter-based care service, I learned very quickly that 3 minutes waiting synchronously on a call was a very long time. 15 minutes waiting asynchronously for a response on Twitter was very quick. Okay? How did 3 minutes become slow and 15 minutes become fast? Because this customer no longer had to navigate through the complexity of the organization while waiting on the phone, saying, press 1 for this, press 4 for this, press 2 for this. Right? All that complexity was dealt with on the other side by the company. Why? Because that Twitter-based care service was empowered to deal with the holistic customer. Without that, without the information to inform your employee who's taking the reverse of all the information to do with the customer wants, needs, perceptions, profile, and not done through snooping, through the active and voluntary participation of customers. Customers would like better service. Do you know any customer who wants worse service? Quite hard to find them. So our job is, in that sense, to be able to listen to the customer in the information that they are providing voluntarily, to respond by building customer social networks, employee social networks, and connecting them together through the customer social profile. My name is JP Rangaswami, Chief Scientist of Salesforce. I hope you've had a slightly different impression of what the social enterprise is about. Thank you for your time.